I'm Ben Montross with the State of Vermont Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Division. In this video, we'll walk through a Level 1 site assessment under the Revised Total Coliform Rule in Vermont. In the video, Meredith Samard, who is our TNC coordinator, will be playing the role of a water system operator performing a Level 1 site assessment at a campground. However, this training should be applicable to most systems who trigger an assessment. The intent of a Level 1 assessment is to identify and repair sanitary defects. A sanitary defect is any defect that can provide a pathway of entry for microbial contamination into the distribution system, or that is indicative of a failure or imminent failure of a barrier that is already in place. When sampling results indicate that a system may be vulnerable to contamination, an assessment is required. Upon triggering a Level 1 site assessment, the water system has 30 days to perform the assessment, identify all sanitary defects, correct the defects, and submit the completed form back to the division. If a system needs more time to fix defects, it can request additional time using the assessment form, so long as it is submitted before the 30-day compliance date. Remember, assessments must be performed by a validly certified public drinking water system operator with the same classification of the system or greater. We recommend that you carry the form with you and fill it out as you conduct the assessment. Please be sure to fill out the form completely by circling Y for yes and N for no. If a question doesn't apply to your system, circle NA for not applicable. Please be sure to work through the form completely. Don't just stop upon finding the first defect. If an entire section doesn't apply to the system, such as if the system doesn't have treatment or storage, circle NA in the gray section bar. Before starting the assessment, enter system info, including system name, WSID number, the class of system, the date the assessment was performed, and circle the type of the system. Groundwater TNC systems without disinfection are classified as 1A systems. Groundwater TNC systems with disinfection only are classified as 1B systems. All other systems are classified as either 2, 3, 4, or D based on the system-specific characteristics. Begin your assessment by looking at changes or events that may impact system integrity and allow contamination into the system. This section of the form identifies changes made to the system or its operation. Possible events include any changes in water quality or significant events such as flooding, storms, pressure loss, or use of emergency sources, all of which may contribute to contamination of the system. Systems are encouraged to perform a comprehensive walkthrough of the system and to interview system or facility staff in order to get a sense of any recent changes, flushing events, fire events, look for any signs of vandalism, and recent maintenance performed. If any of these items identified on the form happen to the system, circle Y. If your system uses a chemical disinfectant, it's a good idea to take a chlorine residual during the assessment. The residual should be close to where you would expect it. A chlorine residual lower than expected could be a sign of contamination or of a sanitary defect. This is also a good time to review monthly reports and other records to identify recent water production data and chlorine residuals to see if they can point to any potential issues in the system. The assessment requires that operators review their sampling locations and sampling protocol. Section 2 of the form goes through sampling sites and sampling protocol and the potential they have on the results. It is really important to try to use the best sample taps at the best locations in order to evaluate the system's integrity. The operator will perform a visual inspection of the sample taps that produce the total coliform positive sample results. If, while taking the samples, the operator used a less than ideal tap, it could yield a total coliform positive result. The division encourages that systems use a non-swivel faucet with separate hot and cold valves that are either smooth nose or that have removable aerators and external threads. We understand that most water systems are not constructed for the sole purpose of taking total coliform samples, so these preferred faucets may not be available. However, given the choice, we encourage that systems use these more favorable taps. Issues such as using an unclean sample tap, a tap where the aerator wasn't or can't be removed, failure to flush the tap adequately prior to sampling, or other sampling errors can result in positive samples. Additionally, anything coming in contact with the sample bottle other than the water being tested can impact the results. This would include putting the cap in your pocket, on a counter, or on the ground while taking the sample, or touching the inside of the cap or bottle. At this point, the assessment looks at system infrastructure and equipment and generally follows the flow of water through the system, looking for sanitary defects. Section 3 of the form covers all possible source types. Most systems are groundwater and will focus on the drilled bedrock well portion of the form. Please complete Section 3 for all applicable sources serving the system. In this instance, the operator is checking out the area around the well, looking for depressions around the well and the well casing that could allow surface water to pool around the casing and potentially contaminate the well. Next, the operator looks at the condition of the well cap. For most systems using groundwater, a damaged or faulty well cap can be a common defect allowing contamination into the system. Be sure to check all of the well cap bolts to make sure they're installed and are tight. Make sure the cap is tight on the casing and the cap gasket appears to be intact and working. In this instance, you can see that the well cap is missing 2 bolts and has 2 loose bolts, compromising the sanitary seal of the cap and potentially allowing contamination to enter the system. Look at the electrical conduit to make sure that it is not cracked and that the connection with the well cap is tight. Also, look to make sure the cap has a vent screen that is intact. In this example, the cap has a mushroom-style vent, which has an internal screen. Other caps have the vent underneath, near where the electrical conduit attaches. Even the smallest of voids or cracks in the conduits, caps, or vents could allow contamination into the system. The next section of the assessment requires that an operator check all treatment equipment to ensure proper function. If you operate a TNC system that doesn't have any treatment, circle NA in the gray section bar and move on to the next part of the assessment. If your system does utilize treatment, changes to the operation and maintenance of treatment equipment can have a large impact on the potential for contamination. Treatment bypasses may occur if valves are accidentally turned, so this is a good time to assess the current configuration to make sure the integrity of the system is being protected. Walk through the treatment plant. Make sure that all of the chemicals being used are in good condition, that the chemical storage tanks have sufficient volume, and that the chemical feed pumps are working properly. Check where the chemicals are added to the water to make sure nothing is leaking and that all intended chemicals are being added appropriately. If your system utilizes ultraviolet radiation for disinfection, make sure there are no faults or alarms and that nothing is bypassed. Next, we move on to examining the storage tank. A poorly maintained storage tank can be another place for contamination to easily enter the system. If a system does not have a storage tank, circle NA in the gray section bar and move to the next section of the assessment. For the purposes of this form, we do not consider hydropneumatic or pressure tanks as storage. Those tanks will be covered in the next section. Start by performing a visual inspection of the storage tank, looking for leaks, any damage, signs of vandalism, or forced entry into the tank. Increased water age in storage tanks can impact the quality of the system, so that is something to consider also. As the water ages, disinfectant residuals decrease and the potential for contamination increases. Next, take a look at the vent and the overflow of the tank. Make sure they have intact screens of 24 mesh made from a non-corrodable material. This is the same size screen used in window screens. Also, make sure the overflow terminates 12 to 24 inches above the surrounding area and that there isn't a chance that it could become inundated by flooding or runoff. In the storage tank example shown, the storage tank overflow is not properly constructed. It does not have a screen, it shows signs of buildup at the end of the pipe, and it does not terminate 12 to 24 inches above the surrounding area. When looking at storage tank vents, make sure that the vents are downturned or have some other means of preventing rainwater from entering the tank. Take a good look at storage tank access hatches. Make sure that the hatch is watertight with a good seal and gasket, and that the lid latches securely. Make sure any penetrations for pumps, level controls, or chemical addition points are constructed in a way to keep surface or rainwater, insects, and rodents out of the tank. In the example shown, the penetration where the pump supply line goes into the tank is not sealed. The void around this pipe could allow contamination to easily enter the tank. Maintaining adequate distribution system pressure is very important to avoid contamination. Make sure any booster pumps are operating properly, that the system is supplying adequate pressure to all portions of the distribution system, and that hydropneumatic tanks aren't waterlogged or deteriorated. In this video, the operator is knocking on the pressure tank. The top should have only air, and the bottom, below the bladder, should be water. If the bladder leaks or the tank is not properly maintained, it can house stagnant water and not function properly. From this point, we recommend, to the extent possible, walking or driving the distribution system, looking for signs of leaks, disturbance, changes, or anything out of the ordinary. If there are vaults with valves, PRVs, meters, or other appurtenances in the distribution system, make sure that they are drained and don't contain standing water, show signs of flooding, or have submerged equipment. The division recommends having a formal cross-connection and backflow control plan, but in the absence of a plan, make sure backflow protection devices are provided where needed to protect the water system. This may be as simple as a hose bib siphon breaker, as shown here, or larger devices based on the specific risk and application. Once you have completed the assessment of the system, anything in sections 1 through 6 that you circled yes must be explained in section 7. This allows us to understand better the defects found at your system. Completion of this section is required for all assessments and goes a long way to letting us know if the assessment was performed completely and adequately. If no defects are found, you must state so in this section of the form. Keep in mind, even if no defects are found, the system has shown that it is vulnerable to contamination, and corrective actions will still be required. Please review resources on the Division's website for assistance in identifying corrective actions when no defects are found. In this assessment, we found the following sanitary defects: 2 missing well cap bolts, 2 loose well cap bolts, an unsealed penetration in the storage tank for the booster pump supply line, storage tank overflow that is unscreened, terminates at grade, and shows signs of potential contamination in the pipe. Once the defects are identified and explained, Section 8 requires that you describe the corrective actions to address each sanitary defect. Every sanitary defect identified must have a corresponding corrective action. All corrective actions are required to be completed within 30 days. However, if a system needs more than 30 days to fix something, the operator may request an extension by proposing an alternate date on the assessment form. We will review the form and consider whether an extension is warranted and reasonable for each assessment. We will be tracking all extended compliance dates, so be sure to keep us updated upon completing corrective actions by submitting supporting documentation. This can come in the form of photos of corrections, or bills, invoices, or reports from contractors who did the work. Make sure Section 9 is completed by entering the name of the operator who performed the assessment with their signature, title, and date that the form is completed. Then check the class of the operator. If this isn't the class of the system, that information goes on the front page. Make sure to mail or fax the form back to us within 30 days of triggering the assessment. Unfortunately, due to federal regulations, we cannot accept completed forms via email. Failure to complete assessments, submit the completed forms, and correct the sanitary defects within the allotted time can all lead to violations, so make sure everything is done and completed on time. This concludes our training video for Level 1 site assessments under the Revised Total Coliform Rule. We hope this video was informative. Please be sure to check back for additional information and resources, both on our YouTube channel and on the Division's website. If you have any questions, a contact list of Division staff is available on our website provided in the description box below. Thanks for watching.